an assessment of what occurred, right? And part of me kind of agrees with you guys that maybe it was over the top, right? But that's, whoever the government that's in place at that time, it's a lose-lose situation, right? If you don't do anything, you're going to get hammered for not doing anything. If you do anything,
well, you look at
right? If you don't do enough, you're going to get hammered for not doing enough. And if you do something, you're going to get hammered for that something. It's still not going to be enough for the others, right? Lose, lose, lose. So looking back on it, I think, yeah, you know what? We probably hurt ourselves economically. Right? So and
I'd say that's
unnecessarily, right? And yes, we may have imposed some things that didn't need doing, right? I don't think necessarily it was just a hysterical thing, right? It was more a benign, benevolent, erring on the side of caution, but too far on the side of caution.
Like
right?
I think
I'd say it started that way.
People you should be forgiving of things that governments did up to like the middle of 2020.
For me, it was the third wave.
Yeah.
The third wave was I forget exactly the calendar date of that, but that's when that was the tipping
Third
point.
wave was end of 21, wasn't it?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
But yeah.
I do remember in July 2020, July 1st, like the mask mandate got lifted, and I was happy about that, right?
Oh, I was.
The other part of me is just, I'm so fucking tired of it, I don't give a shit. It's out of mind, right? It's in the past.
Well,
I don't even think
most people,
COVID
I don't
anymore.
think about it really either, right? Like, if
No,
it
I
comes
don't
up,
think about it
it's
too
just-
much now.
It's just a cold. Like my dad
I would like to see some accountability.
yeah. Well,
like to see
that's what everybody wants to see is some especially in
Yeah, but in this polarized society, basically.
But that's the problem is the polarization is kind of
If we're talking accountability, right? Everyone's looking at it from all sides. What we need to be able to pull off is truth and reconciliation, South Africa style, the way they did when Mandela came to power.
COVID?
With COVID, yeah, like just regarding any social issue, right? Because everyone's up in arms. Everyone's looking at each other, going, whoa, 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 right? You, right? And that's why I kind of went meh the other day when you were looking for, okay, let's hold the government accountable for doing this thing.
What thing?
The Emergencies Act, right?
Oh.
How do we hold the government accountable? That was the debate going on.
Yeah, I don't know
right?
if it's going to happen.
Right?
I don't think there will really be any.
But my response is like, right? Because present company excluded.
Yeah.
Right. Most people out there screaming for this shit.
And
right. Don't want to hold themselves. They don't want to be held accountable.
And
for
I don't
anything,
know
right?
if that's a precedent we really want.
Well, I mean, it's and that's why I blame. Ultimately, I look at the protesters and I go, you know what? You guys are a bunch of shitty little people.
Yeah, but
doing shitty little things, and someone needed to hold you guys accountable.
Why the differential treatment though between and that's the other precedent I'm worried about. Why the differential treatment between the wet sweating protesters and the COVID guys?
Okay, and I'm going to start out by responding to that with, yes, that's a tricky concept. So I'm not agreeing with treating different things differently, right?
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, a lot of context. And I think I've put this on the table before, right? When you are the demographic that holds the power and has held the power for a long time, and you've been the majority, right?
Who is that now? Like when you say the demographic, do you mean like
let's
the political plurality or like a cultural thing?
Let's go back. Let's go back 50 years. Yeah. Now we're talking mid-70s.
Mid-70s.
All right.
Okay.
So up to this point in Canada, white male patriarchy.
Okay. Now I follow what you mean. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So we've still got holdouts in our society 50 years later, where men are feeling threatened. Right. And there are what about men's rights? Right, where, and the one that really bugs me is, everyone's all right about black lives and brown lives and black rights and all these things. What about and gay rights? What about white rights? I got a certain amount of problem with that, right? And the wet sweating in particular, what we've had coming up for the last. Well, it's been building since 2015, and Trudeau stepped into the breach and said he was going to do something about our relationship with the Aboriginals, right? And then did fuck all about it, right? Canada has been facing a reckoning with the native population since that time. So 9 years now. And that's what we're looking at. So that's part of the what's wetting thing.
That's
right?
a question I'd like to see a reporter ask Trudeau. Do you think Gord Downey would be happy with life?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you watched the last concert and how
That was so cringe.
it was.
Oh my God.
Did
Gord Downey filleting Trudeau.
Trudeau at the last hip show in Kingston?
God.
It was.
Yeah, it was.
He thought
it was cringe.
he's the guy who's going to take care of the people of the North that we were all taught to forget about.
Oh yeah,
or
it was
not
just
care about.
hero worship.
Yeah,
Like it was
like-
unseemly. It was unseemly.
I'm like, you know what? Gord is allowed to have his own politics.
Sure.
and that
Yeah.
show was for
Yeah.
Gord, right? You know,
I get. Yeah,
you do you.
You do you, Gord. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But still, is
Like-
like oh, Gord.
But you know, that's not going to age well.
Yeah, politics is like religion.
Yeah,
It's okay to have your views, but it's a personal thing.
yeah.
Well,
You don't just wear it on your sleeve.
The
Right?
thing,
Like if I ask you, like, hey man, what's your political view on this? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the exact analogy is like the guy who is like hyper religious, like the born again, right?
Yeah.
And say, so how are you doing? Hey, Steve. How was your weekend? I see you at work. We're on the water cooler. What's going on? I say, well, things are good because I dedicate my life to Jesus.
Yeah.
And like oh, here.
or the
Have you heard the news?
Yeah, yeah, I heard the good news. Yeah, I love that.
The good word.
or the ongoing trope about vegans, right? You know,
What's that?
it's the joke is always like you always know a vegan because he keeps telling you he's a vegan.
Yeah, he'll tell you.
Or a CrossFit guy. How do you know
CrossFit
somebody's
guy.
in CrossFit? Well, they'll tell you.
Or a Tesla owner. Or
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like that. It's like yeah, you can have your thing, but if somebody doesn't ask for that information, it's best, just be private. It's a personal thing. Like it's awkward. Like it's kind of like so Steve, how was well, I guess you went somewhere with your girlfriend. How was that? Oh, great. Doggy style's my favorite. Like,
yeah. That's,
I didn't
Tell me
need
you're
to know
recording
that.
this.
I didn't need to know that.
Okay. So I think
yeah. No,
I'm gonna
it's
suggest-
it's not something you leave in polite conversation.
the thing is, it's funny you bring up Gord Downey and the tragically hip. What bothered me or stood out for me about that was just like, again, it's part of this whole thing we've got going on as a society. It's like everyone got on board. It became this hysteria. Oh no, Gord Downey's dying. Oh, yeah, it's unfortunate, right?
It was.
Right? Not dissing that, right? But it's not about Gord Downey, and it was unfortunate, right?
I put a rant out on it. Actually, the day it was announced, they had the press conference
That about his
about
terminal
his,
diagnosis.
About his diagnosis, yeah.
Yeah.
I put a rant out on Facebook because I was watching it. I was up in 101 BC, right, and they had CBC on inside the convenience store.
Yep.
That it was basically the only thing in Wanawa besides 2 open camps. But and so immediately after the press conference, CBC started to try this start this hashtag Courage for Gord, and they wanted you to tag using the hashtag. You usually go on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and film yourself or you and your friends singing Courage, the song Courage,
Courage,
right?
yeah.
The hip song, right? And so I put a rant on Facebook about that, just like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Gord and his family are going to need money. Buy hip albums. Buy hip
exactly.
tickets.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how you help Gord and his family. You don't do it by putting a stupid... by badly covering their song.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, this isn't American freaking Idol, right?
Yeah.
I mean...
Spare us the virtue signaling.
For
Put
me-
your money where your mouth is.
And my thing was, I hate hashtag activism. It doesn't, right? But,
Anyway, sorry. Go on, Trent.
Well, I mean, for me, it was, on the one hand, I can't remember if it was before then or since then. The lead singer of Spirit of the West went through a similar thing.
Yes, that was
right?
equally tragic, man. I
Right?
loved that band.
But nobody went through that, right? Nobody. But I mean, Spirit of the West never achieved the same fame that tragically.
They didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
They didn't
But-
have the same. They didn't have the same market, I guess. Yeah.
But what also bothered me was Leonard Cohen died sometime around the same time, right? That guy's a fucking global icon.
He had
Right.
there was
not that same amount.
There wasn't the
Not
same
that
orgiastic,
not
hero
this-
worship.
Well, not this hair pulling.
Well, and Leonard Cohen's cultural penetration was to an older demographic, as boomers,
And his was
older
more
Gen
sudden,
Xers,
though, wasn't it? Like, we didn't have the warning that we did with.
I think he just died.
Yeah, he just died. I think.
Yeah.
Like, he did. We did have this months-long
And then
Alex Trebek style.
Yeah.
Farewell, right?
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, no, it
just.
I will say though that the international accolades that came in for Cohen,
Of course.
were considerable
As it
as
should have
compared
been.
to say Downey was largely unknown outside of Canada.
Well,
Well, that's not true because Eddie Vedder gave him a shout out the last because the
I said largely unknown. Like say compared to Cohen.
yeah, I suppose, but yeah, like because Pearl Jam was doing a concert the same night that the Hip did the last show, and Eddie Vedder was mentioned.
Give a
So,
shout
like,
out to.
Gord Downey, and then Tragically Hip are doing their last show tonight while we're doing this.
That's
concert.
cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
No, it's just the
So the Hip definitely had a lot of within the music community.
Within the music industry, kind of like Rush.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah,
Maybe didn't have the
I-
market
I think
share.
we will not be mentioning Tragically Hip in the same sentence as Rush. Thank you very much.
no, the Rush, I think has
yeah.
actually more global penetration than
Yes.
the Hip did. But the
But-
Hip made that decision
but
to like be
Rush
Canadian.
had never had the same kind of market share, like within music fandom, but within the music industry.
Yeah.
To other musicians, Rush was legendary.
Not to fandom. Like,
I think Rush had better like
better
penetration globally.
Oh yeah,
than the Hip.
100%.
Yeah.
their
But-
fan base is second only to the Grateful Dead.
But there are not legions of musicians who said, "Yeah, I'm a hack compared to Tragically Hip."
No, that's true. Yeah.
No, when it comes down to it, they were a pop rock group, and they were popular.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean,
But it's all that again. It's all that.
like, but I'm just saying
self-centered,
that they were good. The Hip was good. Don't get me wrong. I
Yeah.
love their music, but they are not considered technical.
Yeah, no, they're not the
Icons
They're not the
in
icons
their
that,
craft.
that Geddy Lee and Neil Peart
and
are.
Neil Peart were. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, like
They're not considered master technicians. You know,
And that's what
Yeah.
that's see
Well,
to me. That's what it became. It was this
Yeah.
mass, self-centered,
yeah.
self-indulgent hysteria of the masses. That just,
Well, I will also say that the Tragically Hip had music that really appealed to Ontario. And that's where our media, and I'm not faulting them for that. You write about what you know. But our media, or how would you say, our media mechanism, our media machinery is heavily biased, or, not biased, but say focused or themselves. The Tragically Hip really resonated with people in Ontario because they told their songs, or their songs spoke their story and their history, and not exclusively,
no.
but for a large part.
yeah,
And so when our legacy media looked at the Tragically Hip, they saw themselves. And I think that's why they really gave them the kind of coverage that they didn't give, say, to Spirit of the West, or didn't give to, say, a similar band like Big Sugar, or other, or Les Cowboys Fringants, or something like that, who did similar, who have a similar kind of style, or how would
No, I
you
mean
say,
the Hip got
subject
what,
matter.
The
Right?
Hip got what they did on their own merits, and I
Sure,
don't
they did,
fault
yeah.
them that.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about was the again, it was the self-indulgent, grief-stricken nonsense that the masses, and that was like giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
Supply and demand, right? This is what the
Yeah.
people wanted. This is what the people needed for themselves, and that's why I'm kind of looking at the greater population and going, really, right?
Yeah. Okay, so we got on this. We were talking about
kind of culture war stuff.
cultural snobbery. I think you gave the term.
Well, you brought up
How did we get here?
it was talking about
God, we're senile.
Gord Downey and doing some unspeakable
talking-
act
talking-
to
talking-
Trudeau.
We were talking about reconciliation. How there's a promise made that's not kept.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that. Oh yeah, we were talking about COVID and accountability on COVID. For me, to go back where we were talking about a tipping point, that on the first and second waves, we were erring on the side of caution. And there was no living memory of anywhere of how to respond to something, to a problem of that scale. So I think everyone was very much willing to kind of say, hey, man, let's cut these guys a break.
Yeah.
Be they whatever side of the aisle they were on. People were pretty understanding of governments with the actions they were taking to say, yeah, maybe this is right to do, maybe this is wrong. But the point is, we have no way of judging at this point. Let's be generous. Let's, cut these guys a break. They're doing the best they can. Mm-hmm. I think the change came when we got to, say, the third wave. Because at that point, the population began to say, okay, we've been through this before. We do have a lot of an idea.
We've got precedent. We've got context.
Yeah, we know what works. We know what doesn't work.
We've learned some stuff, right?
And we've learned a few things.
The thing was, I think reasonable people expected that, the plan should change as we learn more about this, right?
Right.
And in some places it did, and in some places it didn't.
And in some places, the reaction of not extending from public health agencies through basically the executive branch of all levels of government in across the Western world, which then enforced the writ of public health.
Yeah,
that desire for change and adaptation was interpreted as a challenge to their authority, and they reacted very territorially and with hostility, and it became about, you don't question me. Bending the knee.
Yeah.
And that's where I want accountability.
I mean, that's been a theme that we've debated back and forth. And I'm going to continue to push back against that to a certain extent. I'm going to take something that you just described as occurring at the third, until we got to the third wave, everyone on both sides of the aisle were reasonable. And I think I'm going to push back against that because I actually started seeing it very, very, very early. Right. And eventually it just became like everything else in our society.
Like say, resistance to public health measures?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it, to me, it was just this ugliness we see online all the time. Right. And it started with, you started seeing people making fun of people wearing masks in their cars. Right. And so I saw the first one of those and I chuckled at it. I thought, oh, yeah, you're right. That's funny. Yeah. Right? Why would... That's just goofy.
Why would you wear your mask in your car?
That's just...
If you're alone in your car, why would you do this?
So, but someone... And then someone pointed out, and this is... And I think this... And this isn't to toot my own horn.
Yeah.
Right? I just think this is what people need to be able to do. Right? Someone pointed out... I managed to hear something on the radio, and someone pointed out that when you put on a mask and you go into London Drugs... come back out to your car, you could take your mask off, but you're touching it with hands that were just exposed around other people. And you're touching doorknobs, you're touching product, right? If you leave your mask on, you're not touching
less contamination.
Less contamination, less risk of it, right? And I thought, that makes some sense, right?
Yeah, I guess.
So, and again, there's nothing wrong with it, right?
I just assumed it was, you got so used to it being on your face, they just forgot.
And that's another thing too.
I assumed that was most of it.
Yeah, and what it came down to for me is two things started happening. First of all, I started seeing this more and more and more, and it went from humorous observation to ridicule to abuse. Right? This attitude towards people for wearing their masks in their car, and then I'm like, what the fuck does it matter? Like, how much control do you need? And these are people who are coming from the don't step on me and tell me what to do, right? Yeah. Somehow they're feeling, and we've had that discussion before,
I think this goes back to the death of good faith, because it's you see this, and I assume the internet is supercharged, but you see this and you immediately assume that the reasoning for this behavior you don't like, regardless of how benign it is the worst reason it could be in your perspective. Right. So the person wearing the mask in their car is not doing so because they just forgot to take it off, or they did, or whatever the benign reason is that it's on there. It's because
they're mask wearing fanatic.
They're mask wearing fanatics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take that a step further.
Yeah.
For me, it's just I feel a need to be a nasty cunt to other people, and that's what I'm going to do. Right? That's all it is. It's just I feel like being a nasty person. I have the freedom to be a nasty person here, and therefore I'm going to be a nasty person. There is nothing about it. You know, they've tried and find a reason for it, but fundamentally, that's what it comes down to, right?
Is it?
I don't know.
Is it, or are they seeing because they're getting to the wrong place? So they're assuming that this person is doing it because they're a mask-wearing fanatic, and they see that person as being of a piece with the people they feel that are oppressing them.
Yes.
And so it's not
A desire to be mean.
It's not a desire to be mean, but this is a physical
reaction to a threat.
manifestation of the thing that's making them feel oppressed.
I think that this, and again, I've mentioned this before, and I typically, I'm going to, first of all, I use the terms left and right, which we've had many discussions about.
Porn star, no,
Right?
But yeah, it did quickly politically break down across those lines.
Right. I see a nastiness on the right, right? And it's just, and I've characterized it that way in a lot of ways. It's for me, it's the right is about power, it's about wealth, and those two things go together, and it's all intertwined with a need to be able to look down on other people negatively.
but that also has a mirror image on the left.
Yeah, I was
So
just saying
here's
that,
my thing. My
that
thing
kind of is exactly the way I see the left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my thing is it's this is not the right and left thing. It's just there's these kind of people,
Yeah,
and they
yeah, that could be.
Well,
right.
the
Like
reason-
it's a
There are people with who want power and wealth and want to look down on other people.
yeah, and those people exist on both sides.
I think that's the nub of our conversation is power. And I don't want to get into that right now, right at this moment. The reason I differentiate between the left and right, because I feel that in the past, what we'll call old left versus new left, that wasn't a thing, right? And while I don't have a lot of tolerance for the new left, right? The difference that is still there is while their acts are nasty, right, and ill-advised and ill-informed and it just poorly thought out, right, there's not an inherent nastiness for the sake of nastiness that comes with that, right? I think across the board, social media has allowed for that and created that as what's the word I'm looking for? Just as the potential for that. It's just brought that out in people. But I think that's always been more dominant on the right, not on the left. The left has its own fucking issues right now, right? It's that they're pushing all this stuff. Like you were talking earlier about, someone being able to categorize. Well, I've got, notwithstanding my anti-vax or my vax views, right?
Did you just say you're an anti-vaxxer?
No.
Did you just say? Did you?
Notwithstanding my vaccination, first of all, it might surprise anyone on my moderation for that approach, but my approach to abortion, gun control, and support for
You're
Israel,
pretty moderate. Yeah, you're.
all these things, right? In
They
fact,
are going to take away your lefty card.
Yeah, we need to fire him and get some people more progressive in here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have failed you all.
You and you.
It's like
If you come in wearing a MAGA hat, I'm telling you.
Well, that ain't
bets
happening.
are up. I'm not so sure.
that ain't happening.
You might do it ironically.
You might do it.
I might do it ironically. Oh, fuck, I don't have my Mac Pap shirt on today. I should have.
Anyway, sorry. Go on. You were talking about kind of like a nastiness that you
yeah,
see on the right.
I mean,
Now, is this something you would say? Can we talk about a new right as well as a new left? And would you say that this nastiness is a feature of it, or do you think it's something that's we have, say, continuity, say, going back to the 50s or 60s?
well, no, I think again, it's all in degrees. I think it was more there on the right. There have been elements of it,
Yeah.
But we've talked about old right and old left. The analogy I always go back to is, the Lougheed conservatives that died out with the Klein conservatives,
Right.
And when I think it was one cabinet minister from the Lougheed era
yeah.
died, And at his funeral, Ray Martin walked in, was going to sit at the back. And the Lougheed conservatives who were there said, Ray, what are you doing sitting back there? Get up here with us.
Right.
Whereas the Klein conservatives were all sitting in the back.
Right.
Right. So that's what the Lougheed conservatives, because they considered Ray Martin
Up here.
more one of them than the new guys coming in. Right. And you start seeing a lot of that around the same time. That's when Bush one was saying, if you're not with us, you're against us.
So late 90s, change of the century, early aughts.
Yeah. There was a lot of that, 1,000 points of light,
Well, 1,000 points of light was
City on the, that was Bush Senior.
that was Bush 41. Yeah, 1,000 points of light. City on the Hill was Reagan.
yeah.
But that conviviality.
That was
of
Reagan. Oh, yeah, I guess
City
it
on the Hill. Yeah, that was
on the
Reagan.
Hill
That
was
was Reagan's.
Reagan.
That was ad campaign for Reagan's second term.
Right.
But for the young people out there, Ronald Reagan was a performer.
For the young people out there.
Yeah. I have this joke with my younger cousin, who's I guess I'm technically an elder millennial, but
Yeah.
but his frame of reference and my frame of reference are completely different. And so my frame of reference is basically with my parents' generation, right?
Sure.
Like if they say something, I know what they're talking about.
Right.
Right. I may know it better than they do for some reason. Right? So at like family vacation a couple years ago, we would talk about something. Whether it was 70s or 60s music or something like that, or this person or that person, and it would be, and I would turn to him. So to Eldersplain,
Eldersplain.
Eldersplain, I like that one.
Eldersplain.
John Bonham was the drummer of Led Zeppelin, which was a rock and roll band from the Great Britain in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And so he's like, and so I do that all the time. Like we talk about something, I could turn to him and go, "Do you need me to Eldersplain for you?" He's like, and he'd be sometimes he'd be, yeah.
Actually, yes. Okay, so on this theme, there's a lot of stuff that I was really.
But I think, I just wanted. I think the trend that this, like, the conviviality between politicians of
yesteryear,
and of others of opposite stripes or opposite sides of the political spectrum, but that tradition of remaining friendly, our friends,
cordiality,
friends on the other side,
our colleagues, yes, or in question period,
right, like,
Mr. Speaker, my learned colleague.
Yeah,
is mistaken.
It's a generational thing, right? This bitterness, this anger, this meanness, I think transcends the political spectrum, and I think it's generational.
Well, I would agree with you.
Right?
We've had that discussion on a number of fronts that something we've reached a watershed as a society.
Because we're in the Gen X moment, the junior Gen X moment now with Poilievre and Trudeau, and they can't freaking stand each other.
No, they can't. Yeah,
right?
they.
Well, no, and they're the products of their times, right? Because and we start seeing that.
Like, because even Stephen Harper and Jean Chrétien are happy to be photographed together in public. They don't care. They get along.
Yeah,
right.
But I
agree with you. I think it started in the 90s. At the end of the Cold War.
Yeah, and under Chrétien, this is why I first started. It was when Chrétien, there was a protest, and he grabbed a protester by the
neck. Yes,
right?
Yes.
And it was arising out of that the response was 100% about spinning the situation as positively as possible for Chrétien and the government at the time.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's where politics became all about spin in Canada anyways.
Well, I don't know. I think it goes way earlier than that. But.
Well, it took on a particular... That's why I first started noticing, okay, they weren't responding to issues anymore. Mm-hmm. It was just responding to what...
imagery.
The public had decided were... Yes, the optics, right?
Yeah.
What the public had decided was the issue right now. That's what we have to deal with, right?
So,
and we saw that with Obama in 2008 when he leveraged Twitter. We saw that with Trump and Trudeau in 15...
Well, I mean, it started on the American side. It started with Clinton, right? Like once the Lewinsky scandal hit, and everything was spin.
Yeah.
Right. Hillary Clinton did everything she could behind the scenes to literally destroy Monica, and she literally ruined Monica Lewinsky's life.
That wasn't politics, though.
Well, it was politics.
Well, except that was personal.
Yeah, that was personal.
Well, he got impeached over it, though.
But that was the Republicans doing that. That was not. That was not Hillary Clinton doing that.
No.
But it was guaranteed she was doing stuff behind
the
the scenes that helped contribute to
the entire messaging from the administration, the Clinton administration, was spin. Or
yeah,
it was spin, right? So that's where that really started. And then, like
I
you
don't
say,
know,
Trudeau
man.
with it.
I even think we go back to
Well, I mean,
the 50s on this.
Okay, well, you going back to McCarthy?
No, like talking about how, it's less about say issue and policy, and more about appearance and imagery.
Well, I think
I'm
been
going
there.
to go back to Diefenbaker and how Union Nationale used their political machine to get him elected. I kind of wonder if this is something we can't trace to the the ability to rapidly transmit imagery. Like there is, I don't know. It's basically a precursor to the fax line.
yeah.
Where they could send an image via telegram, and this allowed newspapers to publish images, albeit in black and white.
Rotoscope, was that what it was called?
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it goes back to there because at that point, there's a couple of really big changes,
Well,
like say the invention of radio.
yeah.
And it was a mark of politics was you had to have the ability to be a good orator.
Yeah.
Because your speeches were not given to a single venue now. They were given to the entire electorate through the use of radio in the, say, 20s and 30s.
Well, yeah, like the Kennedy-Nixon debates from 1960, who they polled after the debate, and they polled people who watched versus people who listened. Right,
listened, yeah.
People who listened on the radio thought Nixon won the debate, and people who watched the debate thought Kennedy won the debate.
And so then we get into the 1950s, 1960s.
Yeah.
Now how you look
Is important.
is incredibly important
Yeah.
because of imagery. And so then I think that's kind of where it begins to start, where we start talking about spin.
Oh, there's no question that politics has always been that. Again, what I'm getting at is, and what I believe we've been discussing is the watershed that we hit. Well, all of a sudden the politics became rude, right? And it became nasty. That
politics
lack of
became about morality,
right,
and I'd say that
so-
started in the 1990s.
and it's nowadays it's just like making the other guy look bad, right? There is not
lot of it, yeah.
there is
A lot of
not a single politician out there these days who's going to concede that their opponent did something right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about
I
finding. So it's
remember hearing this about in the debate for the last provincial election. The debates are really boring now, and there's really not a lot of point to them because everyone is so afraid of giving their opponent that gotcha soundbite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
That absolutely it's all pablum. Everyone is just sticking to a safe, meaningless. How would you say? Like,
And
so
nobody-
vague a position.
And nobody answers the questions.
Yeah, nobody answers the question.
Because unless they can answer the question, is specifically conceived to make
And
their
the-
talking point, answer
Yeah.
the question.
And that's why I'm saying we reached this watershed as a society,
I-
where this is how our politicians behave, and it's also what our what the not just the pundits but the punters expect. Like
Yeah.
everybody out here is just like that's what they're looking for. They want something to pounce on. They want some. The feel good again. The feel good for the individual in our society these days is to be able to point their finger at someone and shit on them.
You see this a lot in image media, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Trent destroys Patty with fact bomb or with logic. You know, like,
Yeah.
And that was a
It's
real
click-
trend
it's
for a while.
clickbait.
Yeah.
Destroys was a word.
Yeah.
You saw not so much now, thank God.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
kind of gone away.
it was
but-
really common, say 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, where that very thing, where we're looking for that. Really
Yeah, and it's always
definitive,
someone
combative
from the left
moments,
is saying
yeah.
someone from the left destroyed someone on the right,
Yeah,
and vice
and
versa.
vice versa.
right? So
Yeah.
it's just like, and it's like I said, that's one of the reasons. Like, if I see an MSNBC headline, I don't check it out.
Yeah.
Because it's just
Yeah.
just reinforcing its own message.
There's
right?
certain media outlets I don't take seriously, and I don't look at them.
I don't look at MSNBC. I don't look at Fox. Right? Those
Yeah,
two are-
yeah. If I will look at them, if I want to know what the spin is, but if I want information,
Yeah.
I don't look to those.
Fair enough.
But on this point, how things can get nasty, and it seems to be a feature of our time. So, how in the hell did I have no idea that Tucker Carlson was coming to speak in Alberta until it was already over?
I didn't know either until it was over. Yeah.
I was
had
toying
no
with
idea.
bringing this up. and
Probably
then
because
I
we're
thought,
neither of us are on X, right, or on Twitter.
It could be, yeah.
right?
Because I heard something about somebody in Ottawa was trying to get a petition to say that the guy couldn't be let in the country. And I remember thinking, that's stupid. But I didn't, whatever. I didn't think about it. And then all of a sudden, he was in Calgary, he was in Edmonton. I'm like, right, holy shit, when did this happen?
Okay. Good. So I got two directions I want to take this conversation.
Okay.
First of all, and getting back to previous conversation we're having without digging too far into it about the UCP and rural Albertans and how we view them and stuff like that, right? And I think I mentioned out loud that I have not been unimpressed with Danielle Smith as premier. I mentioned this 1 or 2 episodes ago. But the fact that she met with Tucker Carlson just...
Yeah, because she did event together.
Yeah.
She was at the event in Calgary.
Why? Because we were just talking about Fox News. And he was so bad, Fox News got rid of him. Right? Him coming up here, how he's going to liberate Canada and all that bullshit, right? Which to me emphasizes just all the nonsense he engendered.
What was the name of the tour? They had some name, something like that, like the Irredeemables or something like this, or like
Deplorables, basket of deplorables or something?
Something like that. It was something like he was mocking that term or something with the name of it. I forget what it was. Anyway.
So there's that. So I'm unimpressed. The other thing is, and we can circle back to this in a second if you want.
What's in his content that's so objectionable? Like you mentioned that it was so objectionable that Fox fired him. What specifically is in Carlson's message do you find really objectionable?
I'll come right back to that. Okay. My second point, and this is just a generic thing. I'm like, please, people, as a society, can we stop in every article that we write, writing, Russia calls its war a special military operation, that it started in February 2 years ago, and that Twitter is now, or X is the thing that used to be called Twitter. Like, fuck off. We know these things, right? It's now called X. Let's just keep calling it X, right?
Yeah. I don't want to call it X.
Yeah.
And they still call the tweets, right? Like,
they still call them tweets, yeah. He tweeted on X, You know. Where else are you going to tweet, I guess? Anyway, yeah. So what is it about Carlson that is really egregious? Like in his content.
I can't even pull out the details, right? But everything that came out of the investigations into him, all the scandals that were hitting Fox a year or 2 years ago, right? And the fact that they knew everything was a lie about Trump's claims about the election. The fact that they were just pushing this shit and they knew it, right? Just the vitriolic nonsense he'll put out there just to get people inflamed, right? And
like what? Is there any like? 'Cause I have been listening to a couple of clips of what he was saying, and he does. He's the exact opposite of what our politicians in debate do, where they play it safe, where he will deliberately throw out positions that are, and he even kind of said this, like in the clips I've seen of someone in Edmonton, somewhere in Calgary, where it kind of says like, I'm putting this in extreme black and white terms because I really want you guys to think about this.
But he doesn't want people to think about it. He's looking for people to he's looking for an emotional reaction. And then if anyone fact checks him, right? First of all, that demographic is likely not to see that fact checking. If anyone directly confronts him, he's going to fake news or blow it off or whatever. Just keep reiterating things. And this is.
Should we play a 5-minute clip of Tucker with Jordan Peterson? You can criticize that.
Oh, he does a clip of Jordan Peterson.
There's one right here.
Okay, so what were they doing together? Like, I saw a picture of Conrad Black, Jordan Peterson, Danielle Smith, and Tucker Carlson together. And oh my God, people were losing their minds. And I thought, okay, but what was Peterson and Black doing there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Were they guests?
Maybe.
Or are they actually on a panel speaking?
I think he's calling it the Sworn Enemy Tour. Just look
That's it. Yes, the sworn enemy tour. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Because that's what the society needs right now.
A sworn enemy?
Well, it's because nobody's got sworn enemies already. What we need is
So we need 'em.
what we need is people stirring the pot, right? And this is why I keep saying there's a complete lack of leadership all around.
Let
right?
me ask you. I saw 3 things he said in the clips I've seen, and kind of stand out. And I want to throw these at you.
Okay.
He mentioned about our assisted dying program.
Okay.
And he said that it was that they are targeting. He said, actually, you know what? Let me take that off the table because I don't know if I can accurately summarize what he was saying there. But he did say that mass immigration dilutes your vote. And that was part of the it's almost like a play on the great replacement theory, that when you import over 1 million people, it dilutes the vote of the native-born population, and that was intentional. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's not an immediate effect, right? There's no guarantees you're going to get, but you're probably right. A proportion of those, if you're more liberal and you've got a more liberal immigration policy, there are going to be people who are going to be. Now you've got a bunch of sympathetic voters, right? I would say, on the left, you're more likely to have policies like that because you're more likely to think like that, and those people are more likely to support you, right? To use an extreme example, the extreme right isn't going to do that. They're not going to give the votes of immigrants, right? Because they're probably not going to appreciate them that much.
Right. He made another point with regards to Christianity and how that a specific emphasis on enforcement of lockdowns seemed to be applied to, like, in other words, a more harsher treatment was applied to Christian congregations who wanted to remain open for services during the lockdowns. And then he mentioned, like, there was a wave of arson that hit churches when the original, and as it turned out, false allegations of mass graves came out, and that excuses were made by Trudeau for these arsons. And he said that this was a deliberate attack on Christianity. What's your position on that, or your observation?
Well, I mean, I've heard some articles. I've even heard some of the native elders, like the native leadership in those jurisdictions, who are saying, on the one hand, they're not surprised. On the other hand, it is not justified, right? So they're themselves saying that this should not be happening.
I would bet you $5 right now, not a single one of those arsons was caused by a native person. Like I believe that 100%. I don't think
you think it's a bunch of woke.
I think it's a bunch of white. Well, no, I shouldn't say white, but yeah, I'm going to say woke activist radicals.
21st century Bader Meinhof, JRA,
maybe something like that.
But Brigades, equivalent.
It could be. Who knows?
Like middle class kids
Yeah.
with no grievances, so they found.
But I'm going to bet you, I would lay money on it that not a single arson act was committed by a native.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if you brought up those 2 points individually, like separately,
No,
or
it's because the ones I could remember.
No, but
yeah, there was no agenda behind that at all.
No, but they were, or did he present them as, okay, on the one hand, we've got the congregations that were prosecuted.
Yep.
And on the other hand, we've got churches that have been set alight.
Yep.
Is he connecting those 2 dots?
I don't know.
Okay. That's why I was wondering about the presentation.
Yeah, I don't know what order he made those things in. And he mocked Chrystia Freeland. Well, he mocked Trudeau a lot. But I remember one part, he mocked Freeland as being just an absolute idiot. But also, he was quite humorous, actually, in what he was doing. He definitely used humor. He kind of his style reminded me, it was reminiscent of, say, like almost like Jon Stewart, in his use of humor, trying to get laughs out of the crowd, that most right-wing demagogues, like, you don't get a Ben Shapiro doing that. Jordan Peterson doesn't do that.
No, Jordan. Well, that's why you can take Jordan Peterson seriously.
Or like, say, an Andrew Klavan or Daniel Hannan. They don't do that. They don't try for humor.
The obvious example is Trump himself, right?
Yeah, but does Trump
go
go for laughs, or does he just mock cruelly?
But that's the response he gets, right? That is the response he gets. He gets from people. And I was going to say, like, this is part of the problem, right? And again, it's all this downward spiral we're in. It's a self-feeding feedback loop, right?
Because the last point I'll get your view on, he came away saying that the first thing that people have to do in resistance to the woke, the ascendancy of the new left, is to mock it. That these people, his words, crave power. They crave power and legitimacy. And the first and most meaningful step you can take to deny them that power and the legitimacy of their power and their sovereign their domination over society is to mock them. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think that's part of where I was going to go with that. It's the mocking, the ridiculing, it's denigration. It is deliberately attempting to strip the dignity of people. Right, and that feeds into this, like I said, this feedback loop, this negative spiral we have of nastiness, right? So, or as I would characterize the woke left, on the one hand, as being very, very misguided in what they're attempting to do. Well, I think what needs to be careful of, what to mock the woke as people, as individuals. That's just feeding the nastiness. That's just that's encouraging people to be mean, right? And that's my problem with our society these days. However, hang on, right? That's always been the way to disarm,
undermine.
Well, I like disarm as opposed to undermine. Undermine to me is a negative thing. You're trying to undermine something that's positive, right? You want to disarm something that's negative.
Okay.
And that's the whole point. If you're you use humor, and maybe mocking isn't the best word, because again, that's denigration, right?
Oh, it was definitely denigrative humor, right? No doubt about it.
So for me,
or like what Carlson was saying was absolutely denigration.
What you need to do is separate the person from the act.
Right.
The person from the word.
Criticize the policy, not the person.
Right. And you don't need to criticize. I agree. Humor has always been the way to disarm something strong and nasty. Right? If you don't agree with it and you're able to logically pick it apart, then the emotional reaction, this is how you deal with any bully, left or right, is to laugh it off. Your emotional, and the woke is what wokeism needs to learn this, right? They feel justified in getting outraged about everything. They're offended about everything. They need to be able to just point at something and go
and laugh.
This is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? How goofy do you need to be to state those things? Right?
So, Steve, have you seen some of these clips?
Tucker?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
I try not to watch Tucker.
Okay.
I think that Tucker is basically he's kind of a Nat Con, but he's so philosophically inconsistent that I can't keep track. But then sometimes he's libertarian, and sometimes he's a freaking fascist.
Sometimes he's a red Tory. Yeah.
And so you're just like, I think he's fundamentally a right wing authoritarian, and I have no time for right wing authoritarians.
What do you think in terms of style, method, and technique? What's the difference between him and Jon Stewart?
Stewart was better at injecting humor.
Right.
Tucker is very
earnest.
earnest.
Yeah, he's still learning
He's
those
very
tools.
earnest. And I find that what little I have seen of Tucker, he parallels he's Alex Jones, but not the losing his mind part. Like, his Alex Jones would work himself up into a frothy lather.
Yeah.
And Tucker doesn't do that. He maintains a more moderate tone.
Yeah. I would definitely say that's who I usually saw with Tucker. But
Yeah.
looking at the clips of his Edmonton and Calgary speeches and some of the latest stuff, since
I haven't seen any
he
of them.
stopped being an employee of media
Yeah.
and has done his own thing, he is the right, like, in other words, he's taken the playbook of the late night talk show comedians
Yeah.
and copied that exactly. But
Right.
he uses right-wing talking points instead of left.
Yeah. So I haven't watched any of his stuff really since. If I happen on it, I see it by
Take
accident,
a look. Take a look at some who's the guy who does he does a spoof of like Alex Jones, but he's a late night guy. He used to be like a guest reporter on Stewart's Daily
Colbert?
Show. Oh, Colbert, yeah.
He was
Is it
actually
Colbert or John Oliver?
no both, all three. Yeah.
Take a look at clips of Oliver.
Colbert, he was doing a lampoon of the used to be the biggest.
Hannity?
No, not Hannity.
Oh,
The guy who was on at 7 at Fox.
Don't know.
Bill O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly.
That's what he was. Colbert was lampooning Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
what he was doing. Yeah.
So look at Oliver, Colbert, like modern Colbert,
Yeah.
and Stewart. Then look at the clips of the Edmonton and Calgary speeches by Carlson.
Yeah.
Like they're mirror images.
Oh,
like
really?
he's
maybe he's
if
getting better at it,
imitation
yeah.
is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely
ripping them off, eh?
Yeah, I think he's ripping off their method. Like he's trying to. Well, it's worked for those guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they make pretty
Well,
damn good careers.
and it works for the other satirists, like the Babylon Bee is awesome at this, right? Like,
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there was the state of Texas is suing the Biden administration is suing the state of Texas.
Right.
Because the state of Texas put up razor wire along the Rio Grande and along
Yeah.
their borders. And the Biden administration is saying, well, they can't do this because the border is a federal responsibility. And so it's gone to the Supreme Court. And so the first thing they did was seek an injunction to stop or to allow the federal government to take down the razor wire and the barricades that the state of Texas had put up.
Yeah.
And so it was the three liberal justices along with Roberts,
Yep.
Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett.
Yep.
So the Babylon Bee does a headline saying Amy Coney Barrett says the Supreme Court decision has nothing to do with the fact that she needs a bunch of landscaping done this year.
That's another crazy one. Like, I wanted to talk a little bit about how people on the Canadian left are losing their mind about Tucker, but whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know how far.
Well, they're losing their minds about everything these days, right? And again, coming back to whoever was you were saying can identify someone's point of view based on their vaccine opinions, right?
Yeah, that if I know your stance on one issue, I probably know
Right.
your stance on
Right.
every issue.
Israel, the whole Israel thing is again, I'm just I believe a reasonable human being looking at I don't even know what words to use, the extremist, unthinking, finger in your ears, la 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 la, support for Hamas that's coming out of the woke left.
Yep.
That's hard to figure.
It's offensive.
Yeah.
Right? And just
I
anything.
just don't see where the commonality of interest lays.
Well, it's this inability to be able to.
It's straight enemy of my enemy.
Yeah, but how is... See, this is what I don't get. How is Israel an enemy of the Democratic Party?
Well, I think, okay, if you take October 7th out,
Yeah, take that out.
right? Take it out of
Yeah.
the mix,
Yeah.
right? The government of Bibi has not done Israel any favors in any way, shape, or form. Politically, like internally, he's had struggles,
Yeah.
right? Legally and politically.
Yeah.
Externally, he's been alienating the world.
Well,
Right?
I don't know,
Right?
man. Israel's
So-
always been alienated. I don't think you can make that worse. On a scale of
No,
1 to 10,
I would
it was
say-
at 10 40 years ago.
Under Yitzhak Rabin, it was not this bad. Under who was it got assassinated? Was it Rabin who got
Yeah, it was
assassinated?
Rabin who
so
got
that was his
assassinated.
second time round.
Maybe. He was the guy who did the Camp David Accord with...
No, that was Begin.
Okay, Begin, yeah.
No. Yerevan did one with
With
they call it. Did they call it
with
the
Egypt? Yeah, and or no, hang on.
No, he did it with Yasser
two
Arafat.
major. There were two major accords. There was the one done with the guy who took over after Nasser, who got assassinated. He was president of Egypt. Basically, he sort of won, salvaged.
Mubarak.
No.
He was the general who took
Sadat.
over. Sadat.
Oh, right, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But Rabin did.
So who was the guy who did the deal with Sadat?
That was
that
Begin.
would have been Begin. Yeah.
That was
Okay,
Begin.
and then there was the guy who did the deal with Arafat to create the Palestinian.
that would have
that
been
was
Rabin.
Yeah.
Okay,
And he's the one who got assassinated for it.
those were the only two times that Israel's the hatred of Israel internationally went down from 10 to about 8.5. Otherwise, from 48, with those two brief windows, like international opinion means nothing to Israelis because they have always been like the United Nations. You look at the number of United Nations resolutions against Israel, it is a uniform record right from 48 onwards. So to say that well, he didn't do anything for Israel's reputation internationally. That's that's like saying the Edmonton Oilers have really bad pitching. It's kind of irrelevant.
No, it's not. It's all relative. I mean, up to a
the
certain
only
point.
international opinion that matters in Israel is in America. That's it.
Yeah. But but as far as the left
Yeah.
here in the West,
Yeah.
aligning themselves with Hamas and the Houthis,
Yeah.
it's straight enemy is my enemy. I don't want to. I know I hate to say
Who's the enemy?
Well, Israel is the enemy of the left because
Why?
Because the Long March of the Institutions brought in a bunch of anti-Semites and anti-Zionists.
It's anti-Zionist. It's not anti-Semite.
No, it's anti-Semitic.
It's anti-Semites too. It's not everyone who's an anti-Zionist is an anti-Semite, but not every.
There's a lot
but there's
of
a lot of
overlap on
anti-Semites.
that Venn diagram.
I dispute that. Right, but
Okay, but you're still wrong.
Okay, we'll get it. Maybe we get into that. Not right now. Okay, but let's
before
stick.
you make your point,
Let's stick with the anti-Zionism.
do you need a cigarette or what?
Say again.
Do you need a butt or what? Because I need a cup of coffee.
All right then.
All right, comfort break.
Okay. I do not, or say, if I could sit down with Tucker Carlson, I would definitely ask him, like, what in the heck does he think is going to happen 5 years down the road to the United States if Ukraine falls?
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm not going to bore you guys with it, but to me, Ukraine falling is a death sentence for the United States. Politically, it's a death sentence. Well, I guess I'm going to have to go on to this.
The
next
I think
step,
we agree that
the next step for Russia is the resumption of the territories of the former Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. So now the Central Asian republics, not just the Baltics, but the Central Asian republics, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, they know that no one's going to help them.
Yeah.
Okay. If the West let Ukraine go, they are sure as hell not going to help Central Asia.
Yeah.
So
but
now,
does Russia even need to go into them? They're practically in the Russian sphere, anyways.
but all of the rhetoric we're getting out of the Kremlin, and again, not just Putin, not just guys like Peskov, Lavrov, Medvedev, Putin, not just Putin and the Siloviki, but out of people like Semyonov, the Russian Pushilin, like the academic elite, the oligarchs, the cultural leaders of that country, they are all extremely revanchist. So my point here is that this is not something that will die if we whack Putin. This is an issue of Russian culture, that they must resume the territorial integrity of, if not the Russian Empire, then absolutely the Soviet Union. And that they must have complete and total control of all of these former territories. The only difference is, scope. Does that include Mongolia or not? Does that include Poland and Finland or not? That's it. That's the only difference is how far it's going to go.
Old Warsaw Pact.
Yeah, like that's the minimum. That's the minimum is the territory of the USSR. The maximum is the Warsaw Pact or the Russian Empire. that these places, because they have Russian minorities and we're a part of Russia, they must belong to Russia. So if you're Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, you know that the only way to protect your territorial integrity is a nuclear deterrent.
Yeah.
You can't compete conventionally with the Russians. Your economy is just not big enough. So you need a doomsday option. And this also follows down the road for South Korea. This applies to Japan. This applies to Vietnam. It already applied to Pakistan. But this applies to Guyana. This applies to 2 or 3 different countries in South America. If you are beside an aggressive, imperialist, stronger, economically larger neighbor, you are on your own. Collective security is a myth. So can we be fairly certain that the South Koreans are going to keep a grip on their nuclear weapons? Yeah, I think we can. Are we fairly confident that the Japanese will be able to keep a grip on their nuclear weapons? Yeah. Armenia? No. Kazakhstan?
Armenia can't keep a grip on its territory.
Yeah, no. Sooner or later, one of their nukes is going to get in the hands of some kind of radical, it's going to get sold, it's going to get stolen, it's going to end up in the hands of some kind of radical terrorist group. Of whatever you want. They could be radical Buddhists. They could be fundamentalist Habs fans, whatever. As soon as a terrorist group gets their hands on a thermonuclear device, they're going to detonate it in the United States. For whatever reason, good or bad, pick your methodology. The only place in the world where they're going to look to detonate a device is Los Angeles or New York. It's going to happen. The United States will not survive that event. So if Ukraine falls, maybe there's not going to be the immediate effect, say, over the next 60 days. But within the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a cycle of dominoes that falls that ends with a thermonuclear detonation in the continental United States. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't necessarily see it going that way. I don't see a Russian victory of any sort in the Ukraine as a good thing for the world. Right? And that's what everyone needs to be looking at. They need to be deterring that.
But
right?
Specifically, we got to say, how does it affect the United States? Like, because again, we're talking about a situation where the rest of the world is expecting the United States to equip Ukraine by itself. So we have to ask, what is the exclusive American interest in the situation?
I think it's. I don't think it's as volatile or as extreme as you presented. If I'm Russia and I'm looking at this, I'm going, well, maybe I don't need to occupy Azerbaijan, Armenia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, right? Because they're all satellites.
They're already
anyways.
satellite states, but they've already been really clear in their rhetoric. That's their plan. Like, this is their manifesto.
Right, but if they're already integrated into trade, let's say, commercially, if not necessarily officially politically, Russia doesn't need to mess with them, right? Now they've got to deal with, now if they're looking to expand, now it's Finland, who's on their border? If not,
Finland.
And Ukraine's
Poland,
been accessed, right?
Belarus.
Finland, well, Belarus is
The Baltics.
a puppet state anyways.
Yes.
Belarus, the
but
Baltic states,
they want to formally
Poland,
annex it.
right?
Like, you remember at the very first 3 days of the invasion, they accidentally leaked a map that showed Ukraine and Belarus absorbed into Russia.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then maybe Romania, right? But now you're dealing with NATO. That's the U.S.'s interest right there, right? Because if Russia, they can forego going after the puppet states already, right? The de facto Eastern former Soviet Union. They come west, now they have to deal with NATO. That's where the U.S.'s interests are. Right now,
why?
NATO can avoid conflict with Russia by propping up Ukraine. Once Ukraine is gone, then all bets are off.
I agree with you.
Right
but
now,
to take Steve, like a recent interview I saw with Steve Bannon, if the Americans don't have an interest in Ukraine, why do they have an interest in the Baltic states?
Now they're treaty bound to the Baltic
treaty
states.
bound.
But what if they walk away from the treaty?
Well, they could.
they could.
And they could. And with Trump, don't tell me that's not a possibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
So what if Trump walks away from the treaty and says, look, man, this is not my issue. Why should America, and I'll say this as devil's advocate, what is the American interest in the Baltic states?
Okay, but now...
Or say, the Baltic states. What's the American interest?
Now the parallels with Germany of 33 through 38 come to the fore, right? Because eventually American isolationism didn't work then. It's not going to work again, right? So that's why people are getting ahead of the game here.
Do you think
right?
you're going to convince Trump on that? Like if it was your job to sell a Trump administration on getting America into a war in Europe over the Baltic states.
Okay, you're asking...
How would you do that?
You're asking American interests versus...
I'm just saying,
Trump,
exclusively American interests.
Versus as perceived by Trump.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, to be really specific.
Putin said you had small hands.
You know what? You joke.
I'm not. Well, I am and I am not. But.
That's what I would probably do. If I really wanted to influence Trump's policy, I would create an info op that says, Putin insulted you.
Yeah, well, Putin thinks this thinks you're a pussy.
Yeah,
Putin
thinks you're a pussy. Yeah, because that would probably...
Putin thinks he can control you. Putin thinks,
totally. Because that's the way I perceive Trump anyway.
I think that's how Trump's mind works generally, right? Like when he's not doing struggle sessions for his supporters, but public struggle sessions for his supporters.
He's very, very... and like this is the...
He's actually a lot like Jim Jones. When you learn about
he is. I think so.
Just in public.
Yeah.
Right? He, because the other day, he had Tim Scott on stage after he won New Hampshire. It was Tim Scott on stage and someone else. And they were talking, and Ron DeSantis quit after Iowa and endorsed him, but he wasn't there. But he like literally humiliated Tim Scott on stage just by saying like, because Tim Scott just got engaged. And he's like, Tim Scott just got engaged. I didn't see that coming. Who saw that coming? I didn't see that coming. He basically called him gay.
Oh, my God.
And then he said, Tim Scott must really hate Nikki Haley. You're up here endorsing me. You must really hate her. And Scott comes up to the microphone and Trump's like, what's he going to do? And he's like, Tim Scott said, I just love you. And he's, just like.
Wow. Crazy. But anyway, so how do you sell the kind of guys who, like, say, a Steve Bannon, who are saying, look, like his point during the interview was that NATO's not an alliance; it's an American protectorate, where America foots all the bills and has all the responsibilities, and it's not fair that the Europeans are allowed to have massive state subsidies on their economies and 6-week vacations, and American people can't. Because America has to cover the cost of European defense.
So now you're not talking apples and apples there.
But if these are the people that are surrounding Trump and the Trump administration giving him advice, how do you counter that and say no? I get what you're saying, yes, but it's in America's interest, nonetheless, over the long run, to bear those costs. How do you make that argument?
Well, I mean, we've taken 2 steps of a standard deviation away from the original question, right? So it is in America's interest. I think that's...
How do you figure?
But it's not
like
obvious to Trump.
If leave Trump out of it for the second, for the moment,
okay,
right? America, generically, no matter who's in power, it's in their interest.
How?
Right? And like I said, isolationism doesn't work for them, right? Never has. Won't this time.
But it's not. It's not obvious to like the wing of the Republican Party that's against Ukraine aid.
Right. Like I said, I'm going back to the original question. Right. How is it in the America's interest?
No,
all right,
now, why isn't isolationism in their interest?
Because they're going to lose out. They're going to lose hegemony. They're going to lose market share. And politically, you're going to have this chauvinistic society that's just pushing envelope, right? Either they watch Russia just expand south and west, and these other countries just roll over, or they end up in a war, right? A war Russia probably wins, and therefore it just becomes a dominant power, right? Now America's been not isolated, but by comparison,
isolated.
by comparison, the U.S. is now smaller than this
Yeah.
new and improved Soviet Union, right?
Yeah.
That's how it loses. So at some point, it loses out. So it's best to start it now. Like I said,
I agree with you.
What the West is dealing with now successfully, or has been up to this point, is being able to look at this and go, okay, this is Abyssinia. This is Spain. This is Czechoslovakia.
This is prelude.
Right? They're doing this before it gets to Poland.
Yeah.
Right? They weren't bound by treaty with Ukraine, but they're basically saying, okay, this is the line in the sand. Right? We can do this without getting involved.
Yeah.
Right?
In other words, we can fight a war with Russia,
Yeah.
but without American blood.
Right. And that's
much more preferable to fight it with American treasure than American
This
blood.
is as good as it gets. And if Ukraine loses, that's bad news for everyone, including the U.S.
100%.
So, moving on to the next question. I'm actually going to skip ahead to the third question, which is...
I just don't know if we can convince the Americans of that.
Russia... No, the U.S., the Europeans get 6-week holidays and blah, 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 and Americans can't do it. Americans could do that. They choose not to, right? Economically, politically, that's not something they want to do for their people, right? They could, right? I don't see that as a legitimate argument, right? In terms of,
should Europe get a free ride on the American taxpayer for its defense?
different question,
Okay.
right? I'm not arguing that yay or nay right
Okay.
now, right? Now, if you want to talk about, Trump is or is not going to get elected in November, which means he is or is not going to take power a year from now. That's all up in the air.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking well, right? You want to talk hypotheticals? And personally, what we discuss about that here and now is irrelevant anyways. Right? It's irrelevant if he loses. It's irrelevant if he wins, like what the three of us think. Right? Hopefully he doesn't win from that point of view. Right? If you want to talk hypotheticals, how do we convince them? Well, I think I've already laid my case out there. Now, from their point of view, you're right. But again, isolationism doesn't work.
On this point about aid to Ukraine being stalled because of they can't get it through the House, where the Republicans have tied it to border security.
Yep.
What is the Democrat insistence on the open border for? I don't understand. Do you guys know what that's all about?
I think it's
Like, why is that so important for them that they're willing to sacrifice Ukraine for the sake of protecting Mexican inflow?
Well,
Or
I mean-
not Mexican, Central American inflows.
right now. What you're talking about right there, it's that's never any question, right? Because in this day and age of finger pointing, it's just like, well, we're not holding it up; it's the Republicans doing it.
Yeah.
We're not tying Ukraine to the border, right? We're not tying the border to Ukraine. That's the Republicans doing that. All we worried about is the Ukraine, right? If you want to have a conversation about the border, let's have a conversation about the border, separate it out. Like that's what drives me nuts about
what I want to know is like in terms of like like real policy.
Why the Democrats
is that so
went into-
important to the Democrats? Yeah.
There's a, I believe, I mean, again, univariate causes versus multivariate causes. There's still the myth, I think it's a myth, within leftist
Or let's say a belief.
the belief within leftist politics that if they can import a bunch of conservative Roman Catholics, that they'll still somehow vote Democrat once they can legalize them.
Oh, the idea that they're importing the future Democrat majority.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Why is it so important
okay.
in terms of policy to the Democrats to keep illegal immigration?
I think, again, to a certain extent, as discussed previously from a Canadian perspective, immigration is generally a left thing. Open to immigration is generally a left thing, right? So that, it's Democrats.
Yeah.
It's not Republicans. I think another thing that's playing out is right now, especially, again, in these vitriolic, polarized times that we live in, right? Any discussion about immigration, there has to be a pushback against, and we can go back to 2016 on this, with Trump's
Build a wall.
build a wall, they're all murders and rapists.
Sorry to interrupt.
right?
I just want to point out that the thing I said about the Democrats, the Republicans believe that too,
Yes, they do.
right? Like that's why the Republicans always want to shut the borders because of the belief
There's a
they're
very
importing Democratic voters.
like Carlson's replacement theory.
Yeah.
Or a great replacement theory.
Yeah. So fundamentally, yeah, both sides believe that.
Yeah, interesting.
Sorry.
No, that's cool. Yeah. No, that's
But
important context.
But like, we talked about earlier how the Biden administration has gone to the Supreme Court to stop the state of Texas from
Reinforcing
because
closing its border.
Again, it's
so
all.
why is it so important?
It's still politics, right? It's all about making the other guy look bad.
And
we've been spending all this time saying ridiculing. Build the wall, build the wall, build the wall.
Yeah, and I think the messaging has overtaken the policy now, and it's just that the messaging has become the policy, even though the messaging doesn't have it.
And that's happened on both sides. Like with the goofiness, and I'm gonna have something to say after I say this thing. Right? There's been all this goofiness on both sides. So Texas and Florida taking illegal immigrants, putting them in buses, shipping them to Washington,
to sanctuary cities,
like it just fucking petty politicking, right?
I thought it was brilliant.
Right? No, it's
brilliant politics.
Also,
it's playing with people's lives to make a petty point.
They're not the only ones doing that. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement actually does that now too.
Oh yeah,
it's the federal government is doing more transportation of migrants out of the South into the sanctuary cities.
Yeah, but at least when it's ICE doing it, it's planned. It's part of a plan. Whereas
it's not really, because they really much just give them a bus ticket.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
I do understand
I do understand that facilities and infrastructure for accommodating and like caring for people, just basically a roof over their heads and medical care for those who need it and what is strained to the breaking point along the American Southwest, along the border.
And this was going to be my counterpoint. I was flabbergasted sometime in the last 48 hours. I can't remember exactly when. I heard a stat that in December alone, I'm trying to remember the math. In December alone, the Texas border process, it was in six figures.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. No, I think it was something like they're doing like 300,000 a month. It was
250 to 300,000 in the month of December alone, and I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously, as a nation, you need to be looking at that, but that takes bipartisanship. People need to be looking instead of like just flinging shit back and forth
what
like
do you
a
mean
bunch of
looking
monkeys.
At that?
What's that?
What do you mean looking at that?
You could look at all sorts of that. You just have to look at it and go, okay, 300,000 people per month coming into your country. That's gonna come with some challenges. Let's say, and that's understanding.
Yeah.
All right.
How do you house them? How do you accommodate them? How do you employ them?
What do we do about this? Right.
Yeah.
So
what should they do about this? You have the floor.
Like the three of us.
Throw a couple of darts. I'm not going to hold you to anything. Just throw a couple of darts. What do you do? From the perspective of saying it's a good thing.
From those numbers?
Yeah.
Those numbers?
What do you do?
I don't know. Right? But nobody's having that conversation. Nobody is having that conversation. Right? It's all about,
well, I think
I
the
gotta
one
be right
side
or
is saying close the border. Don't let them in.
Right.
But if you come from the perspective of saying, no, we should let him in. How do you... Yeah.
So let's
do that?
So start, let's make that one of the conversations, right? What is realistically, how can we come to some sort of
accommodation
consensus on that? Let's talk about that. You can't even talk about that.
I
right?
I don't think that conversation is happening within the Democratic Party. I don't think that conversation is happening within the left.
No, absolutely not.
I mean,
it's on either side.
Forget having a cross aisle or a bipartisan conversation.
I'd say
I don't see one happening within the pro-immigration camp.
Or within the anti-immigration camp.
Well, I see their conversation is close the border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And now...
Yeah, problem solved. Boom. We don't have to worry about feeding, housing, caring, education. No, close the border. Done.
Right.
Thanks for coming out.
There's a conversation. Okay, there's
within
a humanitarian conversation. There is a social economic conversation.
Yeah, within what that benefits pro-immigration camp, I don't see any kind of proposals or discussion or debate or anything going on.
Right,
and
but
you'd think they'd be good at that. They're herd people.
So
they're consensus people.
Hypothetically, let's
do this.
Let's say Trent's part of the Democratic Party and has a say in things and can actually achieve something, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm going,
Yeah.
okay, I agree. 300,000 people a month
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's
a lot.
That's something we need to fucking look at.
Yeah.
Right. So let's not call it closing the borders. Let's call it controlling the borders.
Or say slowing it down.
Right. Yeah. Look, we need to govern this.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Right. So stop this influx and administer it.
Yeah.
Right. There's a demand. You figure out how much makes sense from any
Or
point
so,
of
in
view.
other words, like, what can we accommodate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can we work with here? That's every time it comes down to pragmatism.
I think the biggest challenge to the American system is the fact that, like, there's a significant consensus within the center, like, the center of the Republican Party. I mean, center of the whole spectrum, not like, so I guess the left wing of the right.
Yeah,
part.
yeah.
And in the right wing of the left, that American immigration is broken.
Yeah.
The fact that the country hasn't disintegrated with the amount of illegal immigration they got shows that there's a need for significant structural reform.
Yeah.
In their immigration system, but they can never seem to ever get it done, even though there's lots of people who agree that they should take a lot more legal immigrants than they do. And so the big problem is, like, all these
they should or could?
they could, and they
Okay.
probably should.
Okay.
Because there's a demand. There is a demand for these people because they're
I mean, that's probably the conversation right there.
yeah
Where does could meet should?
yeah
I just didn't hear, so I
Yeah.
wasn't sure.
where does could meet should is a
I
good
think,
one, but
when we first talked about good faith, I think this is a like gun control. Neither side is really being neither side is being at all honest as to what they really want.
no.
The pro-immigration lobby is not being honest as to what, like, again, there's a question as to what their agenda is. Is immigration for electoral purposes on the table, or is it purely economic? There's a lack of belief as to what that agenda really is.
Or
And
is
then
it-
on the other side, you've got people who are, what they really want is a closed border, no immigration.
Yeah.
But that's not what they're saying. They don't have the courage to say that. They're saying, well, I'm still in favor of immigration. I just want it to be controlled. Like, no, you lying son of a bitch. You want a closed border. Say what you mean.
Yeah.
Well,
I think this is why they can't get anything done, because no one's on
Nobody
either side
believes
is
each
being
other.
honest as to what they really want.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on the left, again, I keep coming back to this. The left right now is all about ideals, right? So there's ideals and there's making the other guys look bad, and we can't look bad, right? But it's always about these ideals, right? So and I think this is one of the bizarre things that complicates things too. Is again, it goes to the Statue of Liberty and give me your tired,
You're tired, you're huddled masses.
your huddled
Yeah.
masses,
Yeah.
right? That's an ideal. I think
The
that's
French
where
imposing their views on.
That's imperialism. That's what that is, sir.
that's where the left comes in, right? And but I think that's as American as apple pie.
Yeah,
and
I
mom,
would say,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's there on the right as well.
That's
So I think there's
kind of bipartisan, yeah. That idea that give me the American dream.
yeah.
That you can come here
Yeah.
with nothing and die a millionaire.
So again, they need to be able to have the conversation
Yeah.
where it goes, okay, how do we allow for that, right? And I will go out of my way to say, is at least for one day,
Yeah.
you need to be able to close the Texas border to stop 300,000 people.
Yeah.
Get-
Just overwhelming your resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, that's like put the brakes on this thing.
Yeah. Let's see
Let's
what we
figure
got.
it out. Okay. And I figured that right now we can let 10 people through a day. So let's let 10 people through a day and we'll
Okay.
administer them and deal with that. Right.
What-
And then we'll figure out more. And then we'll get to a point where we can
Now
handle
let's-
50 a day.
Let's just second and third order effects. We get this massive buildup of people on the Mexican border. And we're only, let's say, 10. Let's pick this given number, or whatever number is.
Yeah.
But it's less than the number of people coming.
Yeah.
So now you've got this huge agglomeration of people on the Mexican side. And most of them are not Mexicans.
That's true. And they're getting exploited by the
Cartels.
cartels.
How
Yeah,
does...
because now they have to work for their
They gotta
accommodation.
live. Yeah, they got to live.
Yeah.
They got to feed themselves.
Well, the cartels are responsible for getting them there, so now they got to work for the cartel there.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So how does Mexico City react to that? It's not a problem for Mexico City as long as they can just push them through.
Yeah.
But as soon as the United States stops it, now you got this buildup of people. How, that's not a good thing.
Now
for Mexico, that's not a good thing.
Now there's another dualistic conversation that needs to occur.
Like what happens there?
Right?
And I suppose Mexico could say, okay,
now we're going to close our southern border.
yeah, exactly. We're going to clamp down hard on our southern border. But that's a lot of coastline.
Yeah.
That's a lot of coastline. And if people can figure out how to work rubber rafts in North Africa, they can figure out how to work rubber rafts
Or
in
from
Nicaragua.
from Cuba to...
Yeah. I mean, they'll just
Florida.
come from Central America up by water.
and then
Mexico,
then they just bypass Mexico
Exactly.
anyway.
So...
Yeah, but the Americans can guard their coastline. Well, yeah, if the Americans say we're going to close the border, they can close the coastline. They have the resources to do that. It's not a question of means. It's a question of will.
Yeah.
Whereas with Mexico, even if they have the will, I don't think they have the means.
That could be.
Yeah, and I mean, again, everything about this conversation or any conversation we have, to me, this is, what in management terms is your fishbone conversation. You got a whole bunch of if then.
You call it a fish bone.
Yeah.
I thought you said fish bowl. No. It was a fish bone. Gotcha.
Gotcha. So you just working the problem, right? Yeah, it's an algorithm.
I do think that busing immigrants into blue cities was brilliant politics.
Yes.
Brilliant, because it's really had... I don't know if this was the intent. I kind of think... Is it Greg Abbott who's in Texas?
Yeah.
Greg Abbott is governor of Texas.
Okay. I think his intent was probably to bankrupt those cities. That's my guess. And don't hold me to that because I don't have a lot of evidence to back that up. That was my gut. But I think what it has done, it has really created a fracture within the Democratic Party. It has really driven a wedge between minority voters and the Democrats.
That's great 21st century politics. And if all that matters is you getting into power and staying in power, and that's all that matters on both sides, then that's great politics.
Yeah,
However,
politics. Not policy, politics.
Doesn't make for a functional society.
No. I mean, look at the problems that they're having.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, again...
It's great.
It was these Democratic voters which are propping up the administration that wants to keep that border open. So now the red states are saying, you share the pain.
So, yeah, but it just becomes this cycle of achieving nothing. In fact, achieving less than nothing.
I don't know. It's putting consequences on policy, which is a new factor.
Because the sanctuary cities like Seattle, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, right? They had no consequences to themselves being sanctuary cities because they never got migrants.
That's great.
They never did.
That's
or very, very, very few.
Yeah.
But they were still able to impose their views upon Arizona, Florida, New Mexico, Texas. Well, now they're on the receiving end of mass migration, and it's starting to erode support for the concept.
So instead of being able to have a bipartisan, constructive, national conversation about these things, right? To me, this is just an extension of fuck the sanctuary cities. Is it a point of it's
they
like,
wanted this, now they got it.
I want to make a libtard suffer. I want to laugh at the libtards, right? That is accomplishing nothing.
But what happens if it brings the blue states? Now they actually have to have a constructive negotiation because now they're dealing with the consequences.
Now they're dealing with the consequences. Why should red states subsidize blue state ideology? I'm
not one for owning the libs, but I can get how people, there's a lot of shading for it going around the right. I'm watching Eric Adams cry about how hard this has been on New York City.
Oh, yeah.
So if in the end it brings the Democrats around, because now they're constituents.
Yep.
Because ultimately it's about convincing constituents.
Yep. And look at Trump's numbers in what were blue fortress cities.
Yeah. Well, and even in 2020, Trump had the highest numbers ever voted of any Republican candidate ever between basically all the minorities except for he was abandoned by suburban whites. Yeah, right. His vote was was better.
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway,
His support amongst minorities.
his support amongst minorities was better than he had in 2016. It was better than any Republican.
Better than any Republican in like the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And it's getting even stronger now.
Yes. Yeah, and actually that's the thing that worries the Democrats is because they're seeing their minority base.
Yes. That's what I mean. Like it's really driven a wedge between the Democrats and the minority vote.
Yeah. So anyway, if shipping migrants, a few 100,000 migrants from the southwestern or the southern states,
from the border states
to the blue cities, causes in the end, Democrats have to come to the table to negotiate a rational immigration policy for the United States.
Yeah.
With whom?
With the Republicans.
No, the same Republicans who just pulled this bullshit, just to own.
Well, they're the ones who want they're ones who want.
Yeah.
Have the Republicans who are pulling this shit tried to have a rational conversation with the blue cities in question?
For like 40 years,
Yeah.
and they always get called racists, and that shuts down the discussion. Like that's why we as in the West, have never had an honest discussion about immigration until 2023 and late 2023 with like until after November or after October. We have never, ever been allowed to talk about immigration because it was a taboo. It was a sacred cow. It is an unlimited good. And if you question it, you're a racist. So there was never, ever any room ever to say, okay, like what you were proposing, what can we accommodate? And if we have a finite number, who should we prioritize? And these are fair. I'll give the devil his due here, to borrow a Peterson phrase. Those are really, really difficult questions to answer.
Yeah.
I can understand why a political class would not want to go near that, especially one that's based on such treasured ideals. But it is a conversation that needs to be had. And if this is the only way, and so far, it is the only way that the border states or the red states, which are so far on the receiving end, on the business end of mass immigration, that's the only way they've been able to get the Democrats, the blue states, to the table, then, it's not bullshit. It's
I don't know.
Desperate measures for desperate times.
It just seems to me you should be able to go, okay.
Because they've been trying. Their social systems have been overwhelmed for 30 years now.
Okay. I don't know. Seems to me before you do this thing, Governor of Texas phones the mayor of Seattle, says, listen, here's the situation.
Yeah.
Here are the stats.
And by the time he got to this point in the conversation, he's already talking to a dial tone.
If you're telling
your problem, Greg, not mine.
Yeah.
If that's how it happens, then I'm behind you. All right? Then fuck them.
They had to kind of force the hand of
I
these
do not believe
blue
that
states.
conversation was attempted, and I don't believe that conversation would have ended up in a dial tone, right?
That conversation hasn't happened. Well, the fact that you think it wouldn't end up in dial tone, I think don't want to use the N word, but naivety.
Oh, naivety. Yeah, I was wondering.
But look, that conversation attempted to happen 25 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like this we're talking.
Okay,
this
then-
conversation hasn't been constructive since the late 90s.
Okay.
Right?
So, late 90s, right? Year 2005. Okay, we had this conversation 5-6 years ago. This is what I said. These are the trends.
Yeah.
All right? We're not happy about this. Let's start talking about this before it gets to 2023. And these are the projections, and this is what I'm going to do to you.
Well, like in the Canadian context,
I got to wrap this up here right away.
Yeah, no.
there were people who tried to have, in the European context, there were people who tried to have these conversations, and they were immediately ostracized and pushed to the side. And I think that's where the populism came from. Or that gave birth to populism. And I'll define populism as something that the electorate wants to talk about, but that is expressly and deliberately ignored by the mainstream political establishment. And that brings in your Bernie Sanders, That brings in your Trump. That brings your AFD. That brings in your Vlaams-Blok. That brings in your Front National. That brings in your People's Party. Those guys then move into that vacuum because the mainstream of the political parties don't want to deal with it.
Well, I think the mistake has been on the left and the woke. Again, they just la ideally, and then characterizing everything as intolerance, right? You need to be able to have the rational conversation with the reasonable people, the moderates, right? And you're right. But because that's just, if you shut down the conversation, it doesn't occur.
Yeah.
Right.
And
populism, on the other hand, that's always there. It's always waiting in the wings. It's always waiting for some demagogue to come up and stir it up, right? I don't think it's accurate to say, oh, because those who hold immigration as a sacred cow aren't allowing for the conversation, that's what creates populism. No, populism's always there. It's always got its cadre going on, right?
How do you define populism?
It's grassroots, it's ugly, it's otherism, it's emotional.
Do you think populism can be bipartisan? That could be left and right populism.
Yeah, there can be. Right? It's generally chauvinistic.
See, I think of populism as a neutral thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like more like violence is morally neutral. It depends on how it's wielded, right? Like, so, and we say this about firearms, but so populism the same way, right? Like maybe the sentiment, the populist sentiment that's in your country at that point is ugly and you don't want it gaining control. But at the other time, I mean, if, like from our point of view, if the Conservatives win the next election in the largest landslide in Canadian history, which
remains to be seen,
but if polls hold, right, that could happen.
I'm not prepared to write off Trudeau just yet.
Oh, well, no, one shouldn't.
All.
But him staying
something else to vote for, and I'll vote for it.
Oh God, that's something else we got to talk about.
Not today. I gotta go.
Maybe next time. Just text me on this. Why in the hell are the Democrats so bound and determined to go with Biden?
Oh yeah, that's
nuts.
Well,
I don't get it.
There's other things on that, but again, we'll have to talk about that later.
For next week.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Bye.